Hello Rayclast, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for my Bladefall of Impaling Hierophant. This was my league starter for 327 Keepers of the Flame, and it has turned out to be a pretty solid one overall. Overall, I would say that the build is a very well-rounded sort of build. It's got okay clear, it's got okay damage, it's got okay defense. Doesn't particularly excel in any of those. And as I discussed with my league start plans leading into the league, I didn't really think it would. The skill is certainly not going to be a meta skill. It's definitely still on the weaker end of things, even with the 5% base critical strike chance buff it received. But it is playable. I wish I had waited a little longer to transition into it on my league start. I transitioned pretty much as soon as I got an Ungol's Harmony amulet and a Cold Iron Point dagger, and my damage was very, very bad for quite some time, so my progress really slowed down once I got to maps. And I had to do quite a bit of grinding and take a long time getting through fights and stuff. I got through it all fine, but a lot of that honestly was pretty heavily carried by the Crushing Fists from one of the Woolgrafts. And it took quite a while for it to come online. It definitely heavily benefits from several key pieces coming together, and it feels quite weak until you get there. Overall, I have maybe around 100 divines into this character. Can't say for sure really, I haven't tallied everything, but considering all the awakened gems and the jewels, I got pretty lucky on both my weapon and shield crafts, so they're probably worth quite a bit more than what I spent to get them. But I would say maybe around 100 divines into this character. There are many other builds that would be much stronger with much less investment if you want to follow the meta. That's totally cool. If this is your first time here, my builds really are not meant to be meta-defining, crush the game kind of builds. I just pick something that I want to build, and I build it, I play it, and I share it with you guys mostly for inspiration. I don't really expect, nor do I even recommend anyone to directly follow my build guides, word for word and go along with everything I'm doing. I mostly just want these to serve as inspiration and show that you don't have to play the meta, and if you're willing to invest and think a bit, you can come up with things on your own that you just like to play. And that was the inspiration for this. I just thought Bladefall of Impaling has looked like a cool skill for a long time, and the extra base crit that it got this league was just enough of a push to get me over the edge and decide, alright, I will go ahead and try to play this. And I'm very happy with how it turned out, even though I recognized and still recognize that it was never going to be the strongest build. It is very well rounded. The rest of this map you're seeing here, this is just a pretty standard Maven destructive play setup. This is how I farmed all of the currency to get the stuff that is on this character. It was just destructive play plus Alva plus June plus Heist. Just going through the maps, doing Maven boss rotations and selling the stuff that I got from that, and Syndicate medallions now and then, and temples with corruption chambers and gem chambers for Alva. That pretty much funded this entire build. After this map, I'll throw up a clip of a quick harvest map. I have been farming harvest the last couple of days and farmed up a Mage Blood for the first time ever. I don't even think I particularly want to use it. I may end up just selling it when I actually come up with the next build idea that I want to do. But I felt like I finally found a lucrative farming strategy that I was actually enjoying and could just zone out on and harvest. So highly recommend harvest. I'm not going to bother doing a full video on my harvest setup because there are a million harvest videos out there already you guys can follow. But farmed a Mage Blood with it, first time I've ever had a Mage Blood, and that just took a couple days. So the build can definitely farm up to whatever higher stuff you want. And overall, I think it was a really fun way to start the league. So we'll let these maps play out, and then I'll go into the hideout and actually talk through the things that are on the build. As usual, you can find a path of building in the video description. There's not a lot of notes or special information in there or anything. It's basically just a screenshot of this character at the current time, and I have taken the trouble to check the things in the configuration that should be checked so that you can get a reasonable idea of numbers, although it's really hard to tell exactly how many times this skill is hitting anyways, unless I did some kind of self-poison testing, which I don't particularly care to do. You can just watch the footage and see how it does. At the end of the video, I will throw on a couple higher end content things. I'll throw on a T17 map that perfectly encapsulates why I don't farm or enjoy farming T17 maps. Totally blast the map, totally blast the boss, but die twice to the annoying expanding Elder Rings that I just wasn't paying attention to. and I'll also throw a feared fight on the end. The build at this point can demolish anything up to Uber content, but I am not skilled enough, nor does this build have mega damage nor mega defense, and you kind of need at least one of those three things to be doing Uber bosses, so I haven't even bothered trying them on this character. But it's a great all-rounder for everything up to Ubers, and I will see you in the hideout in just a second. Hey there everybody, welcome to the hideout. I will try to go through all of the things on this character that I can remember anyways. Again, not intended to be a real detailed build guide that you can follow, just some inspiration. So, of course, we are using Bladefall of Impaling. This skill received 5 additional base crit with this patch, so it has a base critical strike chance of 15%. The gimmick with this skill is that although it has this massive base crit, its critical strikes do not deal any extra damage, but they impale enemies on hit, and it has a very large amount of increased impale effect on it. So essentially, to scale this skill, you don't want any crit multi because it doesn't do anything for you, and you kind of want to do the minimum possible investment to get to 100% crit chance so that you're always impaling, and no more because any extra is just wasted since you're not actually benefiting from crit multi or other crit stats. So I decided to do this as a Hierophant. I felt like the Hierophant would be a good base just because it has some really solid general caster stuff with its Arcane Surge here. Can get you a lot of cast speed and a lot of spell damage with the Arcane Surge scaling. Illuminated Devotion gives some nice leech and AoE, and you can pretty easily get unaffected by Chill and Shock by just combining it with a couple of these nodes on the tree. And Conviction of Power I felt would be very solid here. Of course, endurance charges, everybody loves endurance charges, but those free power charges go a long way toward getting you to that 100% crit chance that you need. And then, thankfully, leading into the league, I wasn't really sure what I would take for the 4th Ascendancy. Didn't want to take Divine Guidance because that 10% of damage taken from Mana Before Life would really screw with the Eldritch Battery setup that I'm using. Thankfully, the, let's see, how do you even get there? The Feral Ascendancy from the Bloodlines ended up being very solid. We get this 25% minion damage, which is a nice damage node for us because we're taking the minion damage also applies to you. And then Hunt Leader here, these Summon Spectral Tigers. They are relatively tanky. They pretty much stay alive just fine in all content as long as you are critting frequently and refreshing them. You get 5 of them, and each one gives you... what do they give? Each one gives you 25% critical strike chance, 7% attack speed, and 7% cast speed. So altogether, they give you 35% attack and cast speed and 125% critical strike chance. So again, nice generic stats and crit without wasting into crit multi to get us toward that 100% critical strike chance. So those are my Ascendancy choices. Let's say, I guess I'll keep going with the tree here. We'll do gems and gear last. So the tree, we are working around the top side here. I'll go through rules in a second. One of our main defensive setups here is we are using Glancing Blows, and we want to get to attack and spell block cap at 75. So we're taking some various block nodes here. We've got more spell block here. We've got more spell block here. And of course a good amount of attack block on our shield at 34%. And with all those things together, it gets us to 75-75 block. Now, of course, you don't block all damage because of Glancing Blows, but we are using a Shaper Shield with Recover 5% of life when you block. And we've got a couple little extra points of max res, and we have a good amount of armor, and those are our basic defensive layers. So nothing crazy, but definitely plenty for regular mapping. That Life on Block Glancing Blows setup is a classic for a lot of builds, and it works very well. Beyond that, because I knew this skill was really going to be struggling for damage, I kind of wanted to pull just all the little bits of damage I could out for it. So I knew I wanted to go Eldritch Battery to be able to fit in an extra aura. by using March of the Legion for Divine Blessing. The Divine Blessing support gem doesn't exist anymore, so if you want to do the Eldritch Battery setup for an extra aura, you do need to use March of the Legion. And I knew I wanted to try and figure out low life for Pain Attunement. Losing my voice here. And the only way that I could really think of to do that, because I didn't actually want to be low life, because I knew I wanted to use Eldritch Battery, and that doesn't really work with low life. So I decided that I would look into Coward's Legacy. This is a belt from the temple, and it's got this interesting mod. You count as on low life while you are cursed with vulnerability, and you are cursed with vulnerability. So you're always cursed with vulnerability, and it gives 50% increased effect of curses on you, which is pretty nasty. But because of that, we are able to be counted as low life all the time, so we get 30% more spell damage from Pain Attunement. Now, to mitigate that curse effect is not actually that difficult. We do a couple of things. One is we are using, where is it? The Rational Doctrine Jewel. Rational Doctrine makes it so you have consecrated ground around you while stationary if strength is your highest attribute, and you can create profane ground on critical strike if intelligence is your highest attribute. If your strength and intelligence are equal, which mine are at 201 each, that means that you will get both the consecrated ground and the profane ground, and it makes it so those effects linger. Now, as it says here lower down, consecrated ground makes it so curses have 50% reduced effect on you. So that right there knocks out the 50% increased effect. However, you're still cursed with vulnerability, and there are plenty of other curses in the game. But this node over here, Devotion, gives 25% increased effect of consecrated ground you create. So that gets us another 12.5% reduced effect of curses on us. And then I have tattooed 10 of these tattoo of the Hinekora Death Warden, which go on int nodes and also give reduced effective curses on you. And this actually serves a good dual purpose, because we actually want to reduce our intelligence quite a bit, because of our tree pathing, it was much, much higher than our strength, and we want to get it down to where Rational Doctrine has equal strength and intelligence. So we tattoo these for a total of 60% reduced. And then we use the Yugal Pantheon with the upgrade, gives 30% reduced. So between the 30 and then the 60 from the tree, that gives us minus 90. The base consecrated ground gives us minus 50, and then the extra 25% here gives us a minus 12.5. So in total, we have minus 152.5% reduced curse effect on us. So that counteracts the 50% increased and also gets us all the way to 100% reduced, which means no curses have any effect on us, including the vulnerability, and we can run all the curse mods on maps and they don't do anything to us. So that's very handy overall for another defensive layer. Illuminated Devotion gives this 50% reduced effect of non-damaging ailments on you. We pick up some more reduced effect of Chill and Shock here, and we get the last little bit that we need on the Chill from Glace, so we are unaffected by Chill and Shock while we have Arcane Surge. Another nice defensive / utility layer on top of our block armor and everything. And with this tree and with the gear I'm using, I am not using anything that gives only strength or intelligence, so it's actually very easy to balance the attributes on this character to get the balanced strength and int for Rational Doctrine. Coward's Legacy gives all attributes. Ashes of the Stars gives all attributes. I don't have any strength or intelligence anywhere else, except on the gloves here, where I crafted some just so that I could use higher tier armor bases and a higher tier wand base because of the int requirement. So as long as you have even stats, which you do get from your belt and amulet anyways, and this craft you can just craft both, with all of that and the 10 tattoos for reduced curse effect, your intelligence will end up being only 10 higher than your strength, which means all you have to do is just tattoo one additional intelligence node, and I just tattooed this Killing Blows have chance to consume corpses and recover life. You could tattoo whatever you want there, it doesn't really matter. None of them are particularly impactful, you just want to ditch 10 more intelligence so that your strength and intelligence are equal for Rational Doctrine. Now, Another setup that I wanted to use, again, I wanted to pull out like all of the big things that you can kind of do to get extra damage, because I knew the skill was going to be pretty weak. So I knew I really wanted to be able to run some version of Righteous Fire. You have to, as you probably know, go through quite a bit of shenanigans to be able to run regular Righteous Fire, which is based on your life, because that's just going to burn you down a lot. However, Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion, which is what I'm using, which gives you more cast speed rather than more damage. Now its multiplier is a little lesser than the more damage on regular Righteous Fire. However, I actually think it feels better to have more cast speed. I would rather have a little less raw DPS, but feel better by having more cast speed so that you can cast and move more quickly. So I prefer Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion in general. But since it is based on your mana pool, which as long as you're not like stacking mana, is generally going to be quite a bit smaller than your life pool anyways, it's not going to burn you for nearly as much. And what we are doing is using this Militant Faith Timeless Jewel here. You want Converted by High Templar of Various, and that gives you the Power of Purpose node, which we have overwritten in the Mind Over Matter slot here. This converts 80% of your maximum mana into twice that much armor. So we had something like 1,015 mana, and we converted, 800 of that into twice as much armor. So not only does this give us, a nice 1,600 flat armor, which is a good amount of armor in its own right, but it also makes it so our max mana pool is super tiny, only 215 here, which means Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion is doing a negligible amount of burn for us, so it's very, very easy to sustain just with the little bit of life regen we get from the tree, and then especially when you consider the fact that we always have Consecrated Ground under us, very, very easy to over-sustain that and still have a good amount of regen on top. So, between the extra aura from Eldritch Battery and Pain Attunement, and then this setup to be able to run Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion, we're pulling out quite a bit of extra damage that way. Other things on the tree, I'm obviously going into a decent amount of aura effect since we are using lots of auras, and we needed some reservation efficiency to get us down. Also have this aura effect over here. As you can see, we're picking up some life and energy shield stuff. More armor and energy shield here. Oh yeah, another defensive layer we have is that we do not take any additional damage from critical strikes. This node gives you 30% reduced, and then you can take an armor and ES mastery for 20% reduced. And then I'll go over the next jewel here, which is pretty crucial for your damage, but also for your defense, is this Watcher's Eye. You absolutely want the Impales you inflict last 2 additional hits while using Pride. That's a huge, huge damage boost for this jewel. And then I strongly recommend for your second mod, you go for this 50% reduced extra damage from critical strikes where affected by Determination. That rolls from 40 to 60, but as long as you have 50 or higher, that combined with these two things will mean you take no extra damage from critical strikes. So we're unaffected by curses, we're unaffected by chill and shock, we block 75% of the time, recover life when we do that, and we take no extra damage from critical strikes. So it's quite a few nice little defensive layers thrown together that are fully adequate for general mapping content. The very last thing I'm doing on the tree here is a Light of Meaning for physical damage. Really hard to beat this for just pulling out a lot of damage. We have a lot of nodes in the radius here. So this is giving us something like 120% damage, as I recall. You, of course, want this Arcane Surge effect, since that works with the Arcane Blessing from the Hierophant, and you can take the Mana Mastery for reduced or increased mana reservation efficiency. We go up here to the increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you. We're, of course, grabbing minion damage through here. That also turns these nodes at the Templar start into 20%ers each, since it's 10 Fizz and 10 minion damage. So very solid there. And of course, as I mentioned, we are getting good use out of this 25% minion damage on the small Feral node as well. I think that pretty much does it for the passive tree. With my extra point here when I hit 97, I didn't really have anything important to take, so I just grabbed this Cannot Be Maimed and Hindered. Why not? Put that into anything you want. And I really think that does about do it for passives. For your Pantheon, as I mentioned, Yugal, main reason being you want that reduced effect of curses on you. Soul the Brine King here to make it so you can't be chain stunned and recover faster, also cannot be frozen, and gives you the last bit of reduced chill effect that you need. Alright, So now we will go through gem links and then gear. Our main setup here is Bladefall of Impaling with Awakened Spell Cascade. As it turns out, Awakened Spell Cascade, for whatever reason, the way that overlaps are calculated or figured out with this skill, ended up being a really large damage boost. I figured it would just be a clear boost, and I thought that regular Spell Cascade would be pretty much the same for single target, but with whatever way it figures out the spacing of the spells here, my single target damage immediately went way up when I went to Awakened Spell Cascade. And I did that fairly late in the build's progression, so knowing that now, if you are going to try and make a build with this skill, definitely prioritize getting this Awakened Spell Cascade pretty early, because it ended up being a really large damage boost in addition to the nice clear it gives. Then we're using an Empower 4. Until I got this, I was just using Cruelty as another thing that gives hit damage, but Empower 4 is definitely better once you can get it. We're using Awakened Spell Echo. Obviously was just using regular Spell Echo until I could get this. We're using Arcane Surge support. We always have it on us because of the Hierophant, and it's just a nice 35% more damage. And then we're using Awakened Brutality. Obviously we're doing pure physical damage, and Awakened Brutality also crushes enemies to reduce their physical resistance. So that's our main damage setup. Down here for our main aura setup, we are using an Enlighten 3 linked with Pride and Determination, and just a little level 1 precision here gives us the last little bit of crit that we need to cap out at 100%. Pride and Determination, obviously great for offense and defense respectively. Over here in our March of the Legion, which gives +5 to the level of socketed aura gems, we are using Haste and More Duration. So the Divine Blessing support, if you're unfamiliar with it, this socketed gems are supported by level 25 Divine Blessing. It essentially lets you pay generally a relatively large mana, in this case Energy Shield because we're Eldritch Battery, cost to get a buffed temporary aura. But it lasts quite a while with the level 25 Divine Blessing, and then I have it supported by More Duration as well. So if I pop it here, you can see it lasts 17 seconds. So you just kind of get it in your muscle memory to, every once in a while you just hit that button to refresh your haste. Takes almost no time because we have so much cast speed, especially when our tigers are actually up in maps. So that gives us really fast moving around and casting. And then also over here I am using Summon Skitterbots, which are also an aura gem, so they benefit from the extra levels on the March of the Legion, which will give you that little bit of extra chill and shock effect. And then using Unbound Ailments with them. Never did bother buying Awakened Unbound Ailments here, but you could if you wanted a couple extra percentage points of chill and shock from your Skitterbots aura. Over here I have Shield Charge with faster attacks. That's the main way that we are moving around quickly through maps. Keeps you really zippy. Never did bother qualifying the Shield Charge as well, though it would be nice for the extra movement speed it gives, and we're obviously getting extra quality from Ashes of the Stars, which we'll talk about in a sec here. I've got a Poacher's Mark for one of my curses, and then I've got a Vulnerability for my other curse. I don't think I mentioned it, but you can see here we take Whispers of Doom on the tree so that we can apply 2 curses. Vulnerability is obvious for a pure Fizz build, and then Poacher's Mark is really nice because, especially with the extra quality from Ashes of the Stars, it makes it so we very quickly fill up our Frenzy charges on bosses. You can see it's giving us cursed enemies have 12% chance to grant Frenzy charge when hit, and it reduces enemy physical damage reduction, and it adds a little bit of flat physical damage as well, which is scaled by the effectiveness of added damage on our Bladefall. It's still a pretty negligible amount of added flat damage, but the Frenzy charges and the minus Fizz resistance were better than any other curse I could think of to go there. The only other option really is Punishment if you want another offensive curse, but I felt that Poacher's Mark was the better choice overall. Up here we have a Cast when damage taken and Molten Shell at a relatively low level just so it doesn't take a whole lot of our life off before these pop. And then I'm using Frost Blink, gives us an instant movement option in combination with our shield charge, and it is also one that can cross gaps and such when necessary. And then I have a Brutality support up here. Obviously this isn't actually doing anything for either the Molten Shell or the Frost Blink, but what it is doing is making it so that they do no damage, and they are our only sources of elemental damage in the build. So by putting Brutality on them, you make it so they just don't deal any damage, which means that you can run Reflect maps and you won't kill yourself by Frost Blinking or having your Molten Shell proc. You can put whatever you want there if you just want to make sure you're not rolling Hierophant on your maps. But for that harvest farming video you saw in the beginning, those were all 8 modded tier 16 maps. And I just wanted to make sure that I could roll it, or run as many of those as possible without having to worry about Hierophant as a mod. Alright, finally, we have a Blood Rage for General Frenzy charge generation while mapping, and then over here we have our Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion that I mentioned. You just pop that at the start of every map, and it gives you a bunch of extra cast speed. So now we will go through the gear finally. Uniques up first. We're using Coward's Legacy, which, as we mentioned, enables the whole setup with Pain Attunement and Low Life, so that you get 30% more spell damage that way. And then the only real great amulet choice for this build is Ashes of the Stars. One thing about this Bladefall of Impaling is it gets a very large amount of Impale effect from quality. So of course the 1 extra gem level is nice, but it is also the best damage that you can get from the quality. This Ashes of the Stars with 30 quality even beats out a replica Dragonfang's Flight that just straight up gives +3 levels to Bladefall. The +1 level and the 30% quality is more damage for Bladefall of Impaling because of how much Impale effect it gets from quality. And of course that quality is really nice on a lot of other things as well, you know. It adds extra attack speed to our Blood Rage, it adds extra move speed to our shield charge, it adds cooldown reduction to our Frost Blink. Basically, it's got a lot of really nice quality bonuses in this build, all benefiting from the Ashes of the Stars, on top of the fact that it is the single highest damage thing you can do for Bladefall of Impaling. Obviously, try to look for a 30% quality roll on that. Oh, and then I didn't mention in the tree, we have allocated, or anointed rather, Brutal Skewering, which is way down here on the south end of the tree, and it just gives you, impales you, inflict last 1 additional hit. I'm pretty sure that's the highest damage thing that you can anoint for this build because of how much of our damage comes from Impale scaling. So those are the 2 uniques, 3 uniques actually. We're using March of the Legion as mentioned, of course. That lets us use our extra aura and makes our Skidabots a little bit stronger. Now for rares, most of it's pretty simple really, just life and res stuff basically. Super cheap this league because of how many good uniques Breach stuff spits out. I got this helmet from my own Breach stuff, big armor, big life, tri-res. Bought these gloves and this body armor with good res and PDR and everything for, you know, peanuts. Good rare items are absolutely in the floor this league because of the Breach crafting from the tree. Just really, really strong. I imagine that's going to be heavily nerfed if it even still exists in the same form in leagues going forward. Rings here, again, mostly just life and resistances, and we need quite a lot of dexterity. We get a little bit on the tree, but you need quite a lot more to be able to use your high-level Blood Rage, your high-level Haste, and of course your main attack and your Bladefall of Impaling. So you're going to need a couple of pretty big dexterity rolls on rings, or wherever. As I mentioned, I crafted Strength and Intelligence here just so we could use higher level armor bases and a higher level wand base here at 200 int to use the Omen Wand. For my Eldritch things on these, we've done a little bit of mana reservation efficiency, and importantly this spell critical strike chance on the helmet. Again, that's another way you can get critical strike chance without wasting any investment into crit multi, which is what we want for this Bladefall of Impaling. Down on the gloves here, you definitely want Unnerve on hit for a nice damage boost. And then there are multiple things you could do for the Eater here. I went on Hinder just to slow enemies. There's also Chance to Ignore enemy physical mitigation and a couple other things that you can use depending on your preferences. I liked the Hinder just to slow enemies down. Seemed like a pretty decent thing to put on there. Weapon and shield. Obviously, I'm not like a high-end crafter or anything, but I am fairly proud of these. You know, they're both multi-modded, so nothing crazy, but they are basically exactly what I wanted for these builds, and first time I've really gotten into crafting much at all. The wand, pretty straightforward. Again, because of the tree, I think Fractured all spell skill gems was cheaper this league than it probably ever has been before. Sorry, I keep looking down here. There's a stink bug crawling on my desk. So I think I only paid 8 div for this base, the Omen Wand with the plus level of all spell skill gems. Something like this might be even cheaper now just because there are fractured items being spread out with some frequency by the Breach tree. But bought the +1 level of all spell skill gems, alt spammed until cast speed, regaled then annulled, hoping to keep the cast speed. I did. Then did, gosh, I talked about this in another video, did the multi-mod, cannot roll attack mods, and was that it? Multi-mod, cannot roll attack mods, suffixes cannot be changed. Then you harvest reforge physical. The only thing it can add is +1 physical, or not reforge physical, but rather add remove physical. The only thing it can add is +1 physical spell skill gems. Then just wiped the crafted mods and crafted the spell damage and spell critical strike chance. And then on the shield here, it was my first time using recombinators. Bought a bunch of Shaper shields, rolled tier 1 maximum life on them, bought some other ones that, because both level of all physical spell skill jams and recover life when you block are pretty rare mods and a pain in the butt to roll with alterations and then try to isolate that way, I just bought shields that already had those mods on them and then used the non-random recombinating with another random scoured Shaper shield and then just a crafted low tier mod to essentially use that as a way to rip either the physical spell skills or the life on block off of the Shaper shield and get one that just had those. Once I had those, slammed them together with life ones until I had some that had life and spell block and +1 phys skill gems and spell block. Then slammed those together and on the first try actually hit this one, thankfully. And those are the 3 mods I really wanted, were just the life and the physical spells and the recover life on block. And then just crafted block chance and chance to deal double damage. So again, I got pretty lucky, I feel like, on crafting both of these and the way things turned out. So, you know, your mileage may vary with investment, but these are probably worth more than I spent into crafting them. For flasks, just an Eternal Life Flask of Sealing. I've been using this Doctor's Prefix. I'm pretty sure, yeah, you can get a higher chance. I don't know. I'm critting really frequently, so it just seemed nice to be refilling my Life Flask even when I wasn't killing stuff on like longer boss fights or whatever. Then I'm using a Basalt and a Granite and a Silver and a Quicksilver. Extra movement speed on the Quicksilver. Extra critical strike chance on the Silver Flask. That doesn't matter once we get going, but at the very beginning of a map, before we've summoned our 5 Tigers, we are down a little bit on critical strike chance. So this just gets us going on that a little faster. Once you have your Tigers up, you're at like 99.6% crit strike chance without this. And then just block and stun recovery here, extra armor here, pretty standard stuff. So I think that's about it for the build. Again, I don't really recommend anyone copying this directly. It's definitely on the weaker end in terms of power versus investment. Never going to be a meta skill, but I hope you have seen that you can take something that you just think looks fun, make what you want with it, and with enough investment you can get it to a point where it is fun to play, even if it's never going to be redefining the meta. As I said, I'll throw a T17 on at the end of this and a feared fight, so you guys can check that out if you want to see it in some slightly higher content. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more. I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, first time I've ever farmed up a Mage Blood. Don't really know what I'm going to do with it or if I'm going to do anything with it. Might just resell it when I decide what I feel like doing with the next build. But I had enjoyed that harvest farming I was doing, so I felt like might as well buy a Mage Blood just to have one because I've never had one before. So there it is. Did that in a couple days of harvest farming on this build, and definitely call the build a success overall. Thank you guys for watching. Might be another build coming this league. Subscribe if you want to see that, and I'll see you next time.
Approach, challenger.
Let the blood dance begin! Give yourselves to the void! Shadows, rise and fight! Handle this! Life is so beautiful. Time to up the stakes! None resist my oath.
Unmake.